Drug culture of the 1970s. The United States was unarguably built upon tobacco, and for the most of American history, it was the drug of choice. Nicotine created a sense of euphoria for the working and stressful world, but then in 1964, the United States Surgeon General filed a report that smoking was dangerous to the public, and because of that, the people and the tobacco companies changed. The tobacco companies changed by targeting children. And as the saying goes, if you get them when they're young, you get them for life. They were able to do this by using celebrities. They used the visual media, but unfortunately for the tobacco companies, they were adorned in a warning label. This new media did not work for the tobacco companies.
This new media did not work for the tobacco companies because the youth of the time were different of the youth in the past. Because the youth in the past had grown up with seeing cigarette commercials on TV and on the radio, this did not happen with the youth. Because in 1969, there was a law that passed that cigarettes commercials could not be posted on the TV or radio. But instead, the youth went on to a new type of drugs. The drugs that became trademarked, and the drug culture was trademarked in Woodstock Festival, which happened in 1969. The Woodstock Festival is most famous for three things: the music, the drugs, and the mud. And the youth used these drugs as an escape from their everyday life. An everyday life that was filled with horror and awful. Because during this time, the Vietnam War was going on. The Vietnam War is one of the most bloodiest conflicts that the United States has ever entered. And these youth saw nothing but the death of people, death and body bags being brought home. Death of their brothers, their best friends, and their fathers, and they needed an escape. So they tried many new drugs that would have never been used before. Drugs such as ecstasy, known as the love drug, crack cocaine, which gave you a sense of energy and you could do anything, and of course, and LSD, a drug that allowed those youth to see a reality that opened their mind. LSD was one of the largest drugs being used at Woodstock, and after Woodstock, the LSD spread. And one of the other drugs that these youth used was marijuana. Before the 1970s, only about 7% of all people used marijuana. But then after the 1970s, and during, it jumped to 36% of all of the American youth have used LSD. And that number of 36% of the youth and at that time, 339,000 people had been caught with this drug by the police. And even though LSD was not illegal at that time, it was still a problem for these people. And then the hallucinogenic drugs, which I have explained before, allow them to have an escape and allow them to have a freedom. And allow them to have a freedom, they were able to do many different things with those drugs, as LSD and mushrooms, a natural form of hallucinogenic drugs, went around rampant because they were able to use them to escape from the horrors of the war in Vietnam and seeing their brothers and buddies die. And in fact, many political cartoons use the hallucinogenic effect to appeal to these young people, such as this cartoon, which was to celebrate America's bicentennial birthday, has a very hallucinogenic effect, which, as I have said, would appeal to those under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs. And even some of our most very famous people use drugs, such as our current President of the United States, Barack Obama was part of the 62% of those who have used some sort of drug during his time. And as he got older, he realized that it may not have been his best of choice, but he was caught up with the drug culture. And even though the drug culture seemed that everyone supported it, not everyone supported this. At this time, there was the War on Drugs, created by Richard Nixon in 1973. And this war on drugs has cost the United States Department of Justice more money than anything else in the entire world. The war on drugs also caused more problems than just a high incarceration rate. The war on drugs also created racial profiling with police officers, which is an awful thing, such as the picture shown, which is of a police officer taking down black teenagers because of he suspected them to have drugs, and the war on terror allowed them to do this.